The Kindness of Thorn-Walkers. A short story by ShadowWolf Bunting. There once lived a man made of kindness and scars. He had no castle, no throne, no armored cavalry to ride with. Just a long coat patched in places with memory and grief, and a quiet rhythm in his boots that had walked through fire without ever learning to hate. People called him by many names. Some whispered fool, some muttered martyr, some, in rare moments of truth, said saint. But those who listened close, those who had stood on the edge of giving up until his hand reached for them, they knew his name was Ashur. Ashur had a peculiar gift, not the kind you unwrap or sell or showcase. His was the kind forged in silence, born not of clean inspiration but of bruised tenderness. A kind of art that cost him pieces of himself every time he let it out. Chapter 1. The Commission. The message had arrived mid-morning, with a digital chirp that sounded too cheerful for grief. I don't have much to offer, but I've followed your work for a while. It spoke to me. I need something personal. Something that captures this feeling I can't explain. It's for my sister. She's gone now. Please, I need this. Ashur read it twice, then a third time. He could always feel the difference between people seeking art and people seeking healing. This was the latter. People rarely paid for healing. They paid for distraction. But he answered anyway. Tell me what she meant to you, what you lost, what you're holding now. They replied with fragments, a voicemail of her laughing, a snapshot in poor light, a half-written poem she never finished. It was enough. Ashur didn't need clarity. He needed ache. He cleared the small work table in his studio apartment, a space so narrow he could touch both walls at once, filled with rolled-up canvases, unpaid bills, and the echo of promises made to himself. He lit myrrh, not for the smell, but the weight of ritual. It turned his space from a room into a sanctum. He laid down charcoal, ink, and water-damaged paper with warped edges. Nothing pristine, nothing sterile, just materials that, like him, had already survived something. The image came slowly, a woman formed from sea spray and crow feathers, arms outstretched but not pleading, like she had just learned to fly but couldn't remember if she wanted to. The storm around her wasn't punishing. It was memory-made weather. It took 3 days, no sleep, 1 meal, half a bottle of wine. When it was done, his hands shook from the stillness. He sent it with no watermark, no demand for payment, just the image. Then came the silence. 2 days, 4. Then the reply, actually, this isn't really what I was thinking. I thought it would be more hopeful and maybe a bit prettier. I don't think I can use this, sorry. No payment, no thanks, not even a name. Ashur stared at the screen until it dimmed and faded. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The ache in his chest had already drafted its own eulogy. He walked out into the evening without a coat. The wind bit like it wanted him to feel the difference between pain and numbness. The city at night had always been his church. Neon halos over tired storefronts. Junkies and prophets whispering the same gospel in different tongues. People said the city didn't care. Ashur believed it did. It just didn't explain itself. He walked for an hour, past alley murals and flickering signs, past 2 teenagers arguing about whether love was worth it, and a man feeding pigeons with more reverence than a priest. He stopped at an old concrete wall where street artists left offerings, layers of color and grief, messages to the dead, the living, the lost. He pulled a folded copy of the drawing from his coat, taped it to the wall, and scrawled beneath it in black marker. For the ones who disappear, and the ones left holding their names. He stepped back, watched wind ripple the paper like breath. Did you draw that? The voice was soft. A woman, mid-40s, tired eyes, sharp cheekbones. She held a coffee in one hand and a canvas bag in the other. Yeah, he said. She studied it for a long moment. She looks like she never got to say goodbye. Ashur nodded. I don't think she did. They stood in silence. I lost someone too, she said. Years ago. I don't talk about it. But that, she pointed, that feels like how it still sits in my ribs. He didn't reply, just offered a quiet smile. Thank you, she said, and walked away. Ashur remained, watching the city move around his art like it always had, indifferent but not unfeeling. He turned to leave. That's when he heard a voice behind him. Male, late 20s, self-important. Is that supposed to be your work? Looks like you're profiting off other people's grief? Ashur froze, turned. Excuse me? The man smirked. You think that's empathy? It's exploitation, emotional pornography for broken people. You're not helping them. You're feeding on them. Ashur's fists curled. For a moment, his entire body screamed to argue, to defend, to tear apart the accusation and drag the man through the truth. But then he saw the girl from earlier, just a few steps away, watching, listening. And he let it go. Ashur exhaled slowly. No, he said. I'm feeding them. I just don't expect you to understand the difference. And he walked away. Later, at home, he stared at the blank canvas again. The smear still echoed in his chest, but not enough to stop him. He spoke aloud. Let them say what they want. The work will speak. The people it's meant for will know. The rest will fall away. He dipped his brush into ink and began again. Because kindness wasn't weakness. Because silence wasn't surrender. Because the universe keeps receipts. And Ashur still had stories to give. Chapter 2, The Winter of Salt and Iron. Breinhold had no color in winter, not the kind you could paint anyway. The frost clung like guilt to every plank and nail. Salt from the sea stained the buildings, and iron dust from the old mine turned the air a permanent shade of sorrow. Ashur, 11 years old, walked barefoot over gravel roads that bled ice and rust, because his boots had been stolen 2 weeks ago and no one had noticed. He didn't expect them to. In Breinhold, children weren't raised. They were tolerated. His father, Merrick, was a man made of old debts and newer bruises. He rarely spoke to Ashur except to bark orders or toss a coil of rope at him for hauling. When Ashur disobeyed, he wasn't hit. He was ignored. For hours, for days, silence so complete it felt like erasure. That, Ashur would later understand, was a cruelty more enduring than pain. The work was simple, if endless. Loading scrap, checking salt levels in the drying racks, or cleaning the tools used by men too proud to lift their own hands. Breinhold believed in hierarchy the way churches believed in sacraments. You were either useful or you were burdensome. Ashur learned to smile without showing teeth. Learned how to make himself invisible while still getting things done. He learned how to lie in a way that didn't feel like lying, just softening, shrinking the edges of things so no one would be cut too deeply by the truth. It was in the bitter weeks before spring thaw that he met Solène. She arrived in a wagon that looked like it had been excommunicated from every road it had ever touched. Pulled by a mule older than any man in the village, the wagon was covered in charms, bones, salt jars, painted feathers, and fragments of old saints. Solène was older, sharp-eyed, sun-wrinkled, and half the town said she was a fraud. The other half said she was a witch. She said nothing to correct either opinion. She set up shop near the edge of town, offering herbal tinctures, field bandages, bone setting, and silent listening. No one trusted her, but everyone used her, especially when their wives bled wrong, or when a miner came home coughing iron. Ashur watched her, always from a distance. Until one day, he didn't. It had snowed hard. One of the fishers had slipped and split his chin wide open. His father barked something about staying useful and threw Ashur a dented kettle to fetch hot water from the bathhouse. On the way, Ashur passed Solène's tent. She was outside, scraping wax from a pewter tray, humming something that sounded like a funeral, trying to disguise itself as a lullaby. Their eyes met. He didn't smile. She didn't blink. "Where are your boots?" she asked. "Traded," he said. "For what?" "None of your business," he answered. A pause. Then a shrug. "Fair." He turned to leave. "You want to learn how to make people hurt less?" she called. He stopped. "Not stop the pain," she said. "Just shift it. Give it a softer room to breathe in." He visited her after that. Quietly. Never during daylight. She never asked his name, but she told him hers. Solène. She taught him to bind wounds with linen dipped in willow bark. To speak to people in pain without making himself a mirror. To listen without absorbing. "You've got a face that makes people want to confess," she told him. "Use that well, or the wrong ones will drown you with it. he asked once why she came to Breinhold. She looked at him, long and sharp. I owed something to someone who's gone now. And the dead are loud until they're paid. Ashur didn't know what that meant, but it sank into him like seed into soil. He never said goodbye to his father. One day, he just didn't go back. Selene didn't ask questions. She gave him a bedroll, a copy of a field journal filled with sketches and notes, and a single rule. Don't mistake being kind for being harmless. Ashur left Breinhold at 17. The frost never quite left his bones, and he never forgot the look in Selene's eyes when she told him, "This world will chew on people like you, but if you learn to walk sharp and give soft, you'll survive it, maybe even make something holy out of it." Chapter 3. Ink with Edges. The message was polite. I saw your piece on the alley wall, about the sister, the one with the feathers. That was yours, right? Ashur hesitated. The last time someone referenced that piece, it ended in accusation. But the tone of this one felt different. No demand, no trauma-drenched plea. Just curiosity. Yeah, that was mine. The next reply came quick. You still take commissions? Ashur stared at the screen for a long time. His stomach turned, not from fear, but from the deep exhaustion of hope being called on again. He told himself he wouldn't take on another open-ended piece for a stranger. But he also knew the truth. He didn't know how not to try. Yes, I have new terms. There's a deposit. And a call first. Non-refundable if you ghost. This time, he set boundaries like brushstrokes. Precise, clean, black and white. They met the next day. A video call. The client was a non-binary tattoo artist named Jari. Eyes like lightning glass and hands covered in ink and burn scars. They spoke plainly. No cryptic riddles of grief. No fishing for therapy. I don't want to give you my whole story, but I want something that captures who I'm becoming, not what I survived. Ashur leaned into that. Becoming, not surviving. That was new. That was a fire he recognized but rarely saw lit in others. He sketched while they spoke, not of them, but around them. Shapes that grew out of their cadence, their hesitations, their phrasing. A serpent shedding its own outline. A figure of smoke holding a thread of gold. A ribcage that bloomed flowers instead of protecting a heart. Jari noticed. You draw like you're translating something, they said. Ashur didn't look up. That's what art is. Translation, from the unspeakable to the unforgettable. When the call ended, he sat in silence for a long time. Not heavy, not hollow, just aware. He liked their energy, not because it was soft, but because it was real. They didn't ask him to become their container. They wanted a mirror, not a sponge, and that mattered more than they could possibly know. That night, Ashur worked with more intention than he had in weeks. His lines were bolder, less shadowed in apology. He added contrast deliberately. Not everything needed to be wrapped in softness. Some truths deserved to bite. He printed a draft for Jari the next morning, tucked it into an old envelope from a utility bill, carried it 3 blocks to the post kiosk. There, while waiting in line, he heard a voice behind him. Familiar. That's the guy. The one who exploits people's trauma for street cred. It was the same man from the alley. This time with a woman in tow, smug, bored, recording him like he was a talking dog. Ashur didn't turn. The clerk called his number. He mailed the envelope, took his receipt, then walked over, looked the man square in the face. You're still talking. Still misunderstanding. Still mistaking pain for weakness. He stepped closer. Not threatening, just undeniable. But here's the difference between us. I make things. You tear them down. Let the people watching decide which of those the world needs more of. He walked away. Didn't look back. That night, Jari messaged him. The sketch is perfect. It feels like I've already lived inside it. Thank you. I'll make it permanent. You're the real thing. Ashur smiled. Just a small one. No vengeance. No flame war. No drama. Just truth. Returned. Because sometimes the universe doesn't need you to clap back. It just needs you to keep creating. Chapter 4. The Door Without a Handle. The message came at 2:13 a.m. Hey, I know it's been a long time, but I could really use someone like you right now. Please don't ignore this. Ashur stared at it for 5 minutes without moving. The name on the screen hit harder than the words. Kai. They hadn't spoken in almost 2 years, not since that night Ashur had spiraled, low on food, out of meds, heart cracked wide open, and reached out shaking and ashamed. Kai had read the message, then gone dark. No explanation, no call, just silence so loud it burned. And now, this. He walked to the kitchen, barefoot across cold tile. Poured water, didn't drink it. His mind spiraled quietly, the way it did when he wasn't drawing. He wasn't angry, not exactly. He was something older, something quieter. Like salt left behind after a tide has forgotten you. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he opened his sketchbook. Not to draw, but to see. See what would come through his hands before his mind got in the way. Lines formed, a closed door, smooth and black, standing alone in an empty field. No handle, no hinges. Just a single word scratched across its surface. Here? He didn't know what it meant yet, but it stayed with him. At noon the next day, Kai messaged again. I'm not asking for anything big, just to talk. I'm in town. I thought maybe coffee? If not, I understand. Ashur stared at the screen. What does understand even mean to someone who walked away from your pain like it was contagious? But then he remembered Solen's words. Forgiveness isn't about letting them back in. It's about not letting their shadow live rent-free in your ribs, he messaged back. 1 hour, cafe at 3rd and Hollow. No expectations. Kai was already there when he arrived. Same posture, same nervous fingers tapping a ceramic mug. Ashur approached without expression, sat down slowly. They talked. Awkward at first, then smoother, like strangers auditioning to be old friends again. Kai said all the right things. I'm sorry. I should have done better. And I thought I was helping by giving you space. Ashur said nothing for a long time. Then he asked, so why reach out now? Kai looked down. Because everything's falling apart. And I remembered how you always showed up. How you made things feel like they mattered. And I needed that again. Ashur absorbed that like ink in wet paper. Slowly, deeply. Then he said, You remembered I was good at holding pain. You just forgot I had my own. Kai's eyes glossed. But he didn't interrupt. Ashur continued. I'm not angry anymore, but I also don't have a door for you to walk through. That door closed. No handle, no key. Not because I hate you. But because I rebuilt the house without a back entrance. He stood. I hope you find your way. But I'm not your sanctuary. And he left. That night, he drew the door again. But now behind it, he added something new. A firelight. A shadow of his own shape. And a signpost that read, Only Forward. Chapter 5. The Gallery with Chains. The email subject line read, Opportunity. Featured artist request. Event curated by the Well House. Ashur almost deleted it. The Well House was a boutique gallery in the city's high contrast district, where reclaimed wood floors met $18 cappuccinos and people wore beige like it was a personality. He dropped off postcards there once. Never heard back. That was 2 years ago. The message was short. We recently came across your work through a community submission wall and were deeply moved by your piece for the ones who disappear. We'd love to include you in our upcoming curated exhibit, Emergent Voices, Art as Healing. Space is limited. A small stipend is included. Let us know ASAP. Ashur reread it, twice, then stared at the ceiling like it might answer for him. He didn't have to think long. Recognition was rare. Money was rarer. He sent a polite reply, confirmed his interest, attached samples, gave dimensions and titles. He didn't expect a catch, but it came. Thank you for confirming. Just one small request. Please avoid direct depictions of grief, suicide, or trauma in your pieces. Our patrons are looking for uplifting messages and emotionally safe imagery. You can explore those themes indirectly, of course. Just no depictions that could be considered triggering or too raw. Ashur read it, closed his laptop, and let out a breath that wasn't air. It was disappointment made physical. Safe for whom? And why is my truth dangerous when theirs is never even questioned? He opened his sketchbook, flipped to the drawing of the door. Then he began something new, a figure framed in gold bars, smiling, gentle, elegant, but behind its eyes, fire smoldered. The title, Palatable. He almost didn't send it, but he did. The curator replied the next day. This is stunning. Perfectly captures the theme in a way we think the audience will appreciate. He was in. They didn't know the piece was about them. Opening night came too fast. He borrowed a blazer from a friend who never asked questions, ironed his shirt with a borrowed iron and self-loathing. The gallery buzzed like a hive that only tolerated bees if they had name tags and portfolios. His piece was front and center. People stood before it, nodded, murmured words like so healing and such gentle strength. One woman with a wine glass said, You can tell the artist has empathy, but also restraint. There's no bitterness here. Ashur almost laughed. Instead, he smiled, said, Thank you. He didn't tell them the frame was lined in metaphorical razor wire. An hour in, someone he didn't expect showed up. Jari. Their new tattoo had healed. Ashur recognized it immediately, the ribcage blooming flowers. They didn't speak right away, just stood beside him, both looking at Palatable like it might break into song. Then they whispered, This isn't safe at all. That's why it's honest. Ashur nodded. They liked it because they didn't understand it. Jari smirked. You ever going to make work that doesn't hide a dagger? He thought about it. No, he said, but maybe I'll stop apologizing for the blade. That night, he left the gallery with half a check, 2 compliments, and one lingering ache in his chest. He'd been seen, but only through a filter. Still, it was a beginning, and beginnings weren't promises. They were doors. This time, he knew how to walk through one without leaving himself behind. Chapter 6, The Fragile Apprentice. The message came on paper. Not an email, not a DM, not even a text, a handwritten letter, tucked in an envelope smudged with charcoal fingerprints and rain. It arrived folded in thirds, slipped under his door by someone either stealthy or scared. I saw your piece at the well house. I went home and cried for 3 hours. I didn't know art could do that. I want to learn from you. I want to know how to tell the truth with my hands, please. Even once, I'll come wherever. M. Ashur set the letter down slowly. People didn't write to him like that. Not since Solène. Not in handwriting that looked like it had fought its way through trembling. He didn't respond for a week, partly because he didn't know what to say, but mostly because he did. He finally replied with a meeting place, an abandoned bus stop turned Taggart's Chapel on the city's east edge. Ashur liked it there. The concrete reeked of stale dreams and spray paint, and pigeons nested in the rafters like retired angels. He arrived early, sat on the bench, waited. The kid was 20 at most, skinny, burned at the edges. They looked like they'd only recently stopped being prey. You're Ashur? They asked. He nodded. You're M? They sat beside him carefully, like the bench might give out or he might disappear. Their first words weren't about art. They were about hunger. Not literal, though Ashur suspected that too. Hunger for meaning, for expression, for a way to speak that didn't rely on apology or permission. Ashur listened. Then, slowly, he unzipped his satchel and handed over a small, worn sketchbook. Try, he said. Don't worry about beauty. Find the bruise. M's hands shook as they held it. Like it was a flame. Like they'd never been trusted with anything fragile before, including themselves. They met again. Then again. Each time, Ashur gave a little more. How to shade with absence. How to draw sorrow without caricature. How to write titles that don't apologize. M soaked it in, not fast but fully, like soil drinking sun after too long in frost. Then came the day M asked, How do you stay soft, even when they twist it? Ashur didn't answer right away. He looked out over the cracked sidewalk where weeds pushed through like defiance made green. Then he said, I don't stay soft, I stay open. And I remember that being kind doesn't mean being accessible. He paused. I'm not a safe space. I'm a sacred one. That means people can't just walk in barefoot with muddy hands and break things. M nodded. Tears in their eyes, but not falling. Ashur saw it, the realization. That art as healing wasn't romantic. It was war, and the wounds it used were real. That night, M handed Ashur a drawing. It wasn't clean. It wasn't technical. It was honest. A tree cracked down the center, but still blooming from its split trunk. He didn't speak, just held it like something holy, and said, "You're already telling the truth. You just needed to believe you had the right." Chapter 7. The Seat Beside the Silence. The invitation arrived via a chain email titled Healing Through Creation, a panel on art and recovery. It smelled of overproduced sincerity. But still, his name was on the flyer. That never used to happen. He skimmed the list of speakers, some familiar, some distant, and then his heart paused. Harlan Jex. The name hit like old smoke in his lungs. Ashur had known Harlan once. Not closely, just enough to bleed. 2 years back, Harlan had approached him with a proposition. "Your art has heart. I have reach. We can lift voices, especially yours." Ashur had trusted that. Let him use a piece for an anthology, unpaid but great exposure. He'd even written a short reflection. Harlan never used his name. The piece was published under a vague contributor credit while Harlan's name was splashed across the promotion. Ashur messaged. Once, then twice. No reply. Then radio silence. Now they would be seated side by side. He arrived to the panel early. The venue was sleek, metal chairs that promised discomfort. Walls plastered with healing as non-linear posters made by people who'd never bled for real. He set down his satchel, found his seat, and waited. Harlan arrived 15 minutes late, smiling that teeth-but-no-soul smile, shaking hands like they were currency. His eyes landed on Ashur. "Wow, long time. Glad to see you're still doing this stuff." Ashur just stared at him. The moderator began introductions. Harlan spoke first, eloquent, charming, curated. He told stories like they were exhibits, referenced anonymous artists he had mentored. Ashur could feel him in the front row, watching, listening. When it was his turn, Ashur took the mic. Paused, then said, "Some people tell stories to elevate others. Some tell stories to elevate themselves using other people's voices." He looked at the audience, not at Harlan. When you give your work to someone else, hoping it will grow wings, and they cut the name tag off and staple it to their own, it doesn't just hurt, it warps the truth. He took a breath. "I'm not here to shame. I'm here to remind everyone. Art is sacred. If you carry someone else's work, name them, pay them. Don't harvest their scars for applause." There was silence, then applause. From the front row, M; from the back, Jari. And slowly, others joined in. Harlan didn't respond. He just looked down at his notes and said nothing for the rest of the panel. Afterward, Ashur stepped outside. The air was cold. Honest. Jari appeared with 2 coffees. "You didn't burn him, but damn, you built a fire." Ashur smirked. "I've learned it's better to let truth do the heavy lifting." M joined them soon after. "You gave me permission," they said, "to say no and still be kind." Ashur nodded. Then it worked. He didn't win an award that night, didn't get quoted, but something inside him felt lighter, like he'd finally reclaimed a piece of his voice someone else had tried to polish out of him. Chapter 8, the commission he refused. The email arrived late at night, written in capitalized sentences and eager flattery. "Love your work. Saw you on the Healing Through Creation panel. Totally floored. I run a wellness startup that's all about trauma-informed healing spaces and visual storytelling. We'd love to license your art for our next campaign, especially that ribcage piece and Palatable. We're envisioning a 6-week digital series. Maybe an NFT drop, too. We'll get you exposure, of course. And the healing reach? Huge. There was no mention of compensation. No direct credit. No inquiry about intent or boundaries. Just branding language dressed in spiritual cosplay. Ashur closed his laptop. He didn't sigh. He didn't rage. He simply brewed tea, sat in silence, and thought about what the pieces were meant for and who they were never meant to serve. The next morning he drafted a reply. Not defensive, not wounded, just truth. Thank you for your interest. These pieces were born of sacred vulnerability created for human reflection, not for digital marketing campaigns or commercial repackaging. If you're looking for an aesthetic to signal your healing brand, I recommend hiring a designer. But if you're looking to listen, really listen, to what survivors carry and create, you'll find we don't need branding. We need space and dignity. I decline your offer with peace. Assure. He didn't wait for a reply. He knew it wouldn't come. Later that week, M asked him why he turned it down. You're struggling. Rent's due. That was reach, even if it wasn't pure. Asher nodded. Yeah, but if I start letting others dictate the meaning of my work, I stop being an artist. I become a contractor building other people's narratives, and I didn't claw my way here to become a tool. M was silent for a long moment, then said, I want to be that sure of myself someday. Asher shook his head. It's not certainty, it's clarity. Clarity costs more, but it leaves fewer stains. That night, he didn't create. He simply sat by the window watching the city breathe. He wasn't in demand, he wasn't trending, but he was unbent. And that, he thought, was worth something no currency could match. Chapter 9, The Noise in the Core. It began with whispers. Asher didn't hear them at first. He felt them, like an itch behind the eyes, or footsteps on a wooden floor above a room that should have been empty. It started in the smaller circles. The undercurrents of local artist collectives. A passing comment here. A stray question there. Is it true he turned down the Well House grant for the residency? I heard he ghosted a gallery commission because it wasn't spiritually aligned. He's difficult, guarded, doesn't collaborate. He said nothing, because truth has never needed to shout. A friend, one of the few he trusted, brought it up over foe. It's not about the gossip, Jari said. It's about the tone shift. People are starting to talk like your boundaries are ego. Asher stirred broth and didn't look up. Maybe they're just not used to someone saying no without a wound to point at. Jari raised a brow. Or maybe they expected you to stay soft-spoken and grateful, and now you're not apologizing for your own spine. Asher smirked. Maybe. That same week, a well-known community figure, a gallery coordinator who'd once praised Asher publicly, made a passive-aggressive post. Some artists weaponized trauma-informed as an excuse for poor collaboration and arrogance. You can be talented without being a martyr. No name, no tags. But the message was clear. Asher didn't reply. Instead, he walked to the alley wall where he'd first taped the portrait for the sister who never said goodbye. The wall was covered now, layers upon layers of graffiti, wheat-pasted poetry in rage-shaped color. His drawing was gone, but the words beneath still faintly lingered. For the ones who disappear, and the ones left holding their names. He took out a Sharpie, wrote below it, Some of us never wanted a stage. We just needed somewhere to set our ghosts down. A few days later, someone published an anonymous piece on a community blog, The Cult of Vulnerability, when artists perform pain for power. They didn't mention him by name. They didn't have to. He recognized their language, their fear, their projection. Asher didn't flinch. He posted a public response. If telling the truth makes others uncomfortable, maybe they should ask why honesty feels like performance to them. I don't create from trauma. I create from transmutation. And I will not apologize for having survived beautifully. It went viral in the local scene. Half applauded. Half bristled. A few unfollowed him. He didn't check who. Then came the invite. A podcast. Mid-tier. Moderate reach. Hosted by someone who walked the line between journalism and provocation. The email was polite but sharpened. Would love to have you on to unpack the tension between artistic authenticity and emotional manipulation in the community. Your recent post really struck a nerve. Thought you might want the chance to clarify things. Asher sat with the invite for 2 days. He spoke with no one. He dreamed of wolves walking city streets, quietly nudging art off gallery walls and returning it to the dirt. He woke up knowing what to do. He declined the podcast. Instead, he published an essay on his site, untagged, unbranded, unboosted. I don't owe performance to anyone. I don't owe vulnerability on command. I don't owe collaboration if it dilutes the sacred. I create because there is too much silence in the world, and I am trying to make space for what aches. I will not explain that to anyone who cannot feel it first. He signed it with a sketch, his hands open, cupped together, filled with seeds. That same night, M stopped by his apartment, held out a new drawing, a candle on a cracked altar surrounded by vines. Usher looked at it, then at them. They said, "You didn't get louder. You got clearer. That helped me choose who I want to be." He nodded, no words, but his smile said everything. Outside, the whispers continued, but inside Usher, stillness, not peace, not armor, stillness, because the noise had never been the enemy. It was the temptation to lose himself in response. And he had chosen not to. Chapter 10, The Ghost That Didn't Die. The message came from an unfamiliar sender. We're restoring the old community center in Breinhold. It's being repurposed into a youth space for art, trade, and healing. We've followed your work. We'd like you to design a mural. We believe your voice belongs here. Usher read it 5 times. The name at the bottom was someone he didn't recognize, Mira, a youth coordinator for a nonprofit that hadn't existed when he last walked Breinhold's streets. He sat still, breath shallow. The cursor blinked like a challenge. Breinhold, not just a town, a wound that wore a zip code. He didn't reply for a week. Instead, he made tea, stared out his window at the places he'd healed, held M's latest drawing. 2 hands clasped across barbed wire. Then he opened a new page and wrote only this: "You don't heal where you bled just to prove you're strong. You return if the land calls you, not the people. The ghosts are secondary." Then he bought the train ticket. The ride took 5 hours. He didn't draw, didn't write. He stared out the window at rusted silos and sleeping cows and wire fences that looked too much like old scars. When he stepped off the platform, the air hit him like memory. Salt, iron, pine smoke. The stale breath of machinery that never stopped humming even after the work died. Breinhold hadn't changed much, but he had. Mira met him at the old church-turned-center. She was young, bright-eyed, and clearly nervous. "Thank you for coming. We didn't think you would—" Usher shrugged. "I didn't either." They walked together past peeling paint and uneven flooring. The back wall had already been prepped, whitewashed in readiness. Mira handed him the keys. "You can stay in the guest loft upstairs. We're giving you full freedom. Paint what needs to be painted." That last sentence held weight. Permission not just for art, but for memory. That night, he sat alone on the floor with an old pencil in hand. He sketched the bones of what might become the mural. At first, he didn't think. He remembered. The cold, dark eyes of the miners. The rope burns on his arms from hauling. The silence after asking for help and being met with eyes that didn't flinch, but looked through him. But he also remembered. The night sky that never judged. The way Solen's hands moved with intention, not apology. The way the wind once whispered, "You don't have to stay." Over the next 5 days, the mural rose. Not a portrait, not a message, a myth. A boy standing at the center of a forked path. One road cracked and paved with broken promises, the other covered in brambles but glowing faintly beneath. Around him, ghosts, not terrifying, just waiting. Above, the moon held a brush. Below, the roots of forgotten trees cradled seeds of light. He titled it, "The Choice to Leave is Also Sacred." The town came to the unveiling. No ceremony, just murmurs. Quiet awe, a few uncomfortable silences. Someone asked, "Is that meant to be you?" Asher replied, "No, it's meant to be anyone who ever had to go in order to survive." That night he lit a single candle in the corner where Solen once set broken bones. He whispered, "Thank you. I still hear your voice every time I don't shrink," and left the candle burning. He didn't sleep in the guest loft. He took the midnight train back home. The ghosts didn't follow. They had a mural now. They had a story. They were no longer alone. Chapter 11, The Last Frame. Ashur came home with paint still under his nails. Not metaphorical paint. Actual, stubborn, sacred pigment that had settled into the cracks of his skin like it had chosen him as canvas. He left his bag by the door. Didn't unpack. Didn't sleep. He sat at the window, cross-legged, the city blinking around him, and stared at the wall where blank canvas leaned, untouched for weeks. It was time. He didn't know what he would paint. He only knew it would not be for commission. It would not be for exhibition. It would not be for applause. This was not the art of survival. This was the art of becoming. Before brush met canvas, he lit 3 candles. One for Solène, who taught him how to hold pain without becoming it. And one for M, who reminded him that legacy is not praise, it's presence, and one for himself, not as he had been, but as he was now. The first strokes came like breathing underwater. Slow, pulling memory through resistance. He painted not an image, but a truth disguised in myth. A wolf made of ashen stars walked along a shoreline made of broken clocks. Its paws bled light. Behind it, trees grew upside down, roots in the sky, leaves underground, because everything that nurtures us hides beneath what we bury. The wolf didn't look back, not because it wasn't haunted, but because it had befriended its ghosts. Above the wolf, a sky of mouths, open, speaking all the words Ashur had never said aloud. They dripped letters onto the sand like prayers misdelivered. The wolf kept walking. In its mouth it carried a thread, thin, golden, unbreakable, tied at one end to something off-frame, unseen, but unmistakably present. In the bottom corner of the canvas, Ashur painted a hand, open, empty, facing up, not reaching, inviting, because not all offerings are given to gods. Some are left for the next one through. He didn't title the piece. He simply signed it in the lower right, A, then turned it toward the wall, let it dry in the dark. Not everything sacred needs light to bloom. 3 days passed before he touched his brushes again, not because he was waiting, because he was done, not with art, not with kindness, but with explaining why either were valid. When M came over, they asked, "What's next?" Ashur smiled. "I don't know, but I know what won't come next." Shrinking for people who don't carry water, they sat in silence, comfortable. Ashur brewed tea. No rituals this time, no smoke, no mirrors, just hot water and leaves, and the quiet company of someone who had seen every fracture and chosen to stay. That night, he walked the city again, past murals, past ghosts, past stages he no longer needed to perform on. At an alley wall, long since overpainted, he stopped, took out a marker, wrote 5 words, nothing more. Kindness is the sharpest truth. Then walked away. No applause, no audience, just the sound of his boots on cracked pavement and the long exhale of a man who had never stopped making beauty, even when no one was watching. The end. Or rather, the beginning. Because the art was never the point, the becoming was.